I probably enjoy making toy cars as much as children love playing with them. Kids instinctively pick up any toy on wheels and play with it for hours. It's fascinating to watch their imaginations in high gear. This scroll saw project is easy enough for even a beginner. I'll show you where to find the full-size plans and take you through the building process step by step. Fasten your seatbelt and let's have some fun. Well, I hate to admit it, but once again my inventory was off. I sold something in the store, forgot to remove it from the inventory on Etsy, and I got an order on Etsy. So luckily it's nothing that's that complicated, so I'm going to make what I need right away. I should be able to get everything, most of it done tonight and the rest of it finished tomorrow. This comes from toymakingplans.com. They're calling this pair of old-fashioned cars a Bad Bob's Custom Motors. And since my name's Bob, I couldn't resist making these. And I'm making one in red and one in yellow. Poplar is relatively soft, but these blocks are about 1.25 inches thick. Using my rules of thumb, that has me considering a number 9 or a number 12 blade. And since the pattern is not complex, I elected to go with a number 12 Pegasus modified geometry blade because it will cut faster. For a complete tutorial on choosing the correct size blade for every project, a link to my video on the subject is on the screen and in the description. As I start cutting the first car's body, you should notice that I already drilled the holes for the headlights, taillights, and axles. It's much easier to drill for the lights while the block is still a rectangle before cutting the body's curves. The plans contain a placement diagram for these holes, but I had to modify the dimensions. As I mentioned, this wood is 1.25 inches thick, but the plans were based on 1.5 inch material. The plans called for a 1/2 inch dowel rod for the headlights, but that was too large for two adjacent on 1.25 inch material. I'll use a 3/8 dowel instead, and I also had to move the placement around a bit to keep the proportions looking good. I'll leave the taillights at 1/4 inch diameter, but I also had to offset those locations a bit. I should mention that some scroll saws cannot cut material this thick. I have a jet scroll saw that can handle 1 inch material, and I have a PS wood scroll saw that will cut 1/4 material with no problem. My Pegasus scroll saw had no issues with this 6/4 poplar, and I've used it to cut 6/4 oak and even a maple. These vehicles are made up of gentle curves, so there are no tight corners or angles to negotiate. The cutting isn't difficult, but it's slow going. You may be tempted to push the wood into the blade extra hard to speed up the process. I know because this frequently happens to me. Be careful not to let this happen because it can cause problems. The first is that the blade may start to flex and bow. Then you'll get a curved or angled cut rather than a straight 90-degree vertical edge on the piece. Second, the blade may overheat and start burning the wood. If a blade overheats and starts to burn, you must replace it immediately. The last thing that can happen is for the blade to break. A broken blade is always a sign you have too much tension on the blade, you cause the blade to overheat, or you're putting too much pressure on the blade. Since the bottom of the vehicle was flat, when I attached the pattern to the wood with scroll saw tape, I carefully aligned the bottom of the car with the edge of the board. This saved some cutting time and ensured a long, straight bottom because that board had been run through the table saw. As I come around the top of the car, you can see the holes drilled for the headlights. This project is an excellent illustration of two axioms of scroll saw woodworking. First, you need to take your time and let the blade do the work. Second, this craft takes time and patience to create functional and beautiful projects. Here's a valuable tip to check whether your cuts are square. After you finish an exterior cut like this one, push the piece you just cut out from the waste piece surrounding it. The piece should slide out easily. Then try pushing it up from the bottom out of the top. It should easily slide out that way as well. If the piece slides out one way but not the other, that indicates your table is not at 90 degrees to the blade, or that you were pushing too hard and did not get a straight cut. Cutting the second vehicle was identical to the first, so I'll skip that step and make the fenders. The fenders are made from 1/2 inch poplar, so I first exchanged the number 12 blade with a number 5 blade. The fenders are not tricky. Just follow the line and let the blade do the work. The car bodies and the fenders are easy for a beginner to cut, but the thick bodies are a reminder that if you want to purchase a new scroll saw, you should ensure it can cut stock up to 1.5 inches thick. Otherwise, you may have to turn away from making some projects because of the saw's limitations. I'm not afraid to admit when I make a mistake, and that's what I did here. I drilled axle holes per the size called for in the plans. However, the spoked wheels I have on hand came with axle pegs, and they are much smaller diameter than the holes I drilled. If the holes were too small, enlarging them with a bigger drill bit would be an easy fix. The only way I can think of to fix this will be to glue some 1/4-inch dowel rods into the holes, then drill the proper sized holes into them after the glue dries. Whenever a vehicle has fenders, I have some wheels that will be used on hand. I place them over the spot where they will be when added later to ensure they won't rub against the axles. That's not a problem here, as these fenders are shaped such that they have a running board in between the front and back, and the bottom of the assembly is mounted even with the vehicle's bottom. I checked the plans to see which way the fender should face, since the front and back are slightly different. Then I added glue to one of the fenders and pressed it against one side of the car. Next, I flipped the car over and added the second fender set to the other side, carefully orienting it properly. Items like this are often mirror images of each other, so you need to have each side properly aligned. After double checking, I added glue to the proper side of the fender and pressed it in place on the second side of the vehicle. This assembly must be clamped tightly while the glue dries to ensure a good bond between the parts. I have plenty of F-claps handy, but the vise on the end of the workbench seemed lonely, so I decided to use it. The vise provides plenty of straight horizontal pressure. Once the glue is dry, I'll plug those axle holes and drill for the axle pegs. After painting, I'll mount the wheels. I was in a hurry to get this set on the way to a customer, so I didn't show how I added the headlights and tail lights, but that was just a matter of cutting some 1/4 and 3/8 dowels and gluing them into the holes drilled for them at the first step. You can make either or both of these cars and paint them any color, but I prefer bright colors for children's toys. The source for the plans and a source for the spoked wheels are listed in the description. I had fun making this set. I'm sure you will too. If you leave a comment on the video, I will reply. I'd appreciate a like, as it helps to get the video recommended to others and helps me to grow the channel. You know how to subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you find it difficult to wait until I post my next video, 2 suggestions for what to watch right now are on the screen.